In this video, we're going to go through everything you need to know to create a realistic kitchen in SketchUp and D5. We're going to go through the whole steps in modeling, materials, lighting, and the final render. And if you want to create realistic renders like this, watch the video all the way through the end. Okay, so we're gonna get started here by taking a look at a reference image which I took online from Pinterest, and we're gonna model based off of that. A lot of it is going to be basically eye guessing. However, we're going to try to be as precise as possible, and by using the rectangular tool, I'm creating the floor here, and with the F key, I'm offsetting in the walls and doing the height on 300 centimeters. By the way, if you use another unit like inches or anything like that, feel free to use that. The workflow is going to be basically the same anyway. However, right now I am creating the baseboard of the kitchen and I am grouping it with the rectangular tool. Now I am drawing the insides of the cabinets, or basically where the fridge is, as you can see on the reference image, and then I'm push pulling it upwards all the way to the ceiling. Now, in the middle, I am just drawing a line with a line tool while using the L shortcut, and then with the move and control key, I am actually duplicating it on both sides. That way I can delete now the middle line, and with the push pull tool once again, I will push it inwards to create a depth which will actually make the whole thing more realistic and based on the image that we have. Now I'm going to group everything that I'm creating, that way I can work in a non-destructive workflow. I'm doing the same here. This is a smaller cabinet, it's only 30 centimeters wide, and I'm grouping this as well. And now I'm going to create a standard cabinet by which is a 60 by 60 here, and we're going to push pull it upwards all the way just like the other cabinet. And now we can just copy and move them 3 times. So basically what we're doing here is I'm using the M key and the control key together, and then once I copy it once, I can just type in 3x and it'll basically tell SketchUp to do the same movement and the same copy about 3 more times. Now over here, I'm just doing a few guidelines to actually model the upper cabinets as well, and I am grouping them too. Now I push pull this about 30 centimeter inwards. That way there's actually head space for anyone who's going to be working in this kitchen. And then we basically just do the same thing as downwards. I'm basically just modeling all the upper cabinets. As of now, we haven't created any gaps between them or anything like that. This is just raw modeling still in this process. So we're going to continue, and I am going to go forward to the last upper cabinet. You want to be able to group all of your modeling because it's just a lot easier to make any change later on, because we will need to make changes later on as any other model, because it's hard to get everything right in the first try. However, right here I am modeling countertop, and basically it's just going to be marble later on. We're going to apply the materials. And as you can see, I just exploded everything in the lower cabinets, and I grouped them all together in one group instead of them being grouped one by one, because right here I'm going to need to divide them for an area which is going to be brass later on. However, it's just room for us to be able to open the actual cabinet. So as you can see, I'm using the eraser tool here with the E key, and I'm taking off all of the lines. That way it is a lot easier for us to just push pull the whole thing together rather than doing all of the little surfaces one by one. And as you can see, this worked exactly how I thought it would. And then we're going to do the same thing on the midpoint, because that's where we also need to draw dividing part, which is going to be brass once we apply the materials. And we're going to move and copy this upwards for about 1 centimeter, and then downwards for about another 1 centimeter. And we're going to take all of these off with a delete key as well. I'm not sure why I haven't used the eraser tool in this, but it works both ways fine. And now as you can see, we now actually have depth in our cabinets. Next up, what we're going to do is I've actually noticed that the gap between the doors of the fridge is a bit too much, so I'm actually going to make it a bit more narrow. I'm going to get them closer to each other for about 1 centimeter. I'm going to do that the same. One thing that you can notice here is that once you actually push something, then all you need to do to push pull that same amount is just double click on the surface, just like what I'm doing right here. I'm not actually pushing it, I'm just double clicking on all of them, and it's basically helping to move through everything a lot faster. Now, right now I'm just creating a depth for the backsplash as well, and I will also move to the upper cabinet, the first one, which is a glass upper cabinet, and I'm just offsetting in the frames which we will need for the actual glass, which you will see later on how they will look like. And now I'm push pulling inwards the surface where the actual glass will be. Same thing in the upper cabinets. Now I'm just drawing the part where we will divide the actual gaps, and now I am just push pulling this inwards for 3 centimeters, and now I am just doing it all together on all of the cabinets. Cool, so now I'm selecting all the division lines, and I will move and copy them on the right for just 1 centimeter. That way we can actually do the divisions between them as well, so they just do not look like a whole same surface. And I will push pull inwards all of the gaps here just to create the cabinets. As you can see, a very non-destructive workflow, very fast and very easy. Now I'm actually measuring where we need to get started with our kitchen island. So I typed in 120 centimeters, which is basically the standard of the distance that we need from the cabinets and the island. And now I'm just drawing some guidelines which will help us go through the modeling a lot easier and not guess as much as we did in the process of the cabinets basically. Cool, so now I'm drawing the rectangle with the R key as a shortcut, and I will push pull this upwards all the way to the countertop. Basically we're going to leave it the same height as the countertop on the kitchen. As you can see, we can snap the guidelines as a help for us to get it right. And now I'm going to offset this on the outside, because from the reference image you can tell that there is actually the marble on the countertop of the actual island is a different height from the marble on the countertop of the actual cabinets. So I'm going to group this as well. And now I'm going to go ahead and draw the arc, which is the wooden table that complements the actual island. So first of all, I'm going to draw one of the arcs, and then what we'll do is once we create the surface, I'm copying it on the other side, and I can just flip that on the green axis, and as you can see now I can just connect the actual surfaces with the line tool. Once again, the L key for shortcut, and now we'll make this whole thing one surface. I will move it downwards just like in the reference image, basically I guessing a lot of the stuff, but now we have a surface of a table, which is basically an oval table. Right now I'm just doing the, I guess, table legs here, right? And I'm just push pulling it downwards. I'm trying to match the position of it horizontally with the island as well. So pretty basic modeling, easy, swift, and very non-destructive as of now. Right now I'm creating an opening on the wall. I'm basically just drawing a rectangle and using the push-pull tool to create an opening for the actual windows. And then I will go to the 3D warehouse and I will type in for a sliding window. And in just a second you will see that I will be able to select one of the windows, download them, put them inside, and then I will increase the size of it. And basically this is just matching the actual opening instead of modeling the whole windows ourselves, because that would be a bit more time consuming than just downloading it and then basically, yeah, just modifying it. As you can see now, it is perfectly fit in our opening. Next up, I'm gonna go back to our 3D warehouse and I will type in curtain. And in the curtain this time, I will just place it there, I will rotate it, and it will be right next to the actual window. As you can see, right now I'm trying to populate the scene with a lot more ready to use assets. The 3D Sketch Warehouse is just so useful. There's just so many good models in there, and I don't think any modeling or I guess native modeling or 3D application or software has as much in store for a library as SketchUp does. It's just amazing, and it just makes your workflow a lot more efficient. Cool, so now after checking what we have going on in the reference image, I noticed that our kitchen island here is a bit off scale, so it's a bit smaller than it needs to. So basically I just go ahead and increase it in size. And what I'm doing here is basically I'm rotating all of the chairs to not look identical, because we need some randomization in renders, because they will just not look as natural if they're all super rigid and 90-degree angles. And that's basically what I'm trying to do here, is just to randomize the rotation of them a bit and the placement that they have. Cool, so now I am just basically drawing the shelves of the glass cabinet that we have here. I will change the size of it and the difference in distance from them, and now we'll just copy them, and now we have the cabinet, the glass cabinet that we drew the actual frames for earlier. Back to the 3D warehouse, I will go inside and try to find a sink. I found one pretty quick. I'm just gonna place it right there on the countertop, and I will draw the opening. That way it does not interfere with the surface of the countertop, and I will push pull it inwards just so we have a lot more realistic once we go to the rendering. We do not want to be able to tell that there's not an actual opening in the sink, and we actually do need it that way anyway. As you can see, we did create some openings right underneath the countertop by deleting one surface. This is why it is good to group all of your model and be very aware of a destructive workflow and stay away from it. And it was a pretty quick fix. As you can see, I just closed one surface and everything was back to normal. Next up, I just downloaded a stove. Once again, found it in the 3D warehouse, super fast, super quick, textured and everything. I just directly input it into our model, rotated it, and it basically looked like perfect. It just fit there totally fine. So this is another reason why I suggest you to use SketchUp in your 3D modeling, especially for interiors. Cool. So next up, what I will do here is I will close off the ceiling. I will draw a rectangle with the shortcut of the R key, and I will push pull it upwards with the shortcut of the P key. So now I will offset this inwards and I will create the same kind of ceiling as in our reference image. So with the F key, I will offset it inwards. Of course, I will need to modify it a bit and to something like that. I tried 80 centimeters, it worked fine on one side, and then I will move it for another, I think, 35-40 centimeters on the wall where the cabinets are. I'll push pull this upwards, that way we create a bit of a recessed ceiling, and then we will also need to create another recession just for some more recessed lighting. This type of ceiling is a bit more complicated to my liking. I actually do not like super complicated ceilings. However, it just was the reference image and I just followed it as close as possible as I could by basically eye guessing it. So once I create one of the arcs on the side, which is basically a rounded rectangle, I think, I just basically create and take the same arc and then just flip it for all of the corners. As you can see, I just flipped it and then now I move it to the corner and I am free to delete all of the lines which we do not need as of now. And I will continue to do this for all of the sides of the ceiling here. I will push pull this inwards for a little bit less than our first recession. However, now it is time for us to go to the 3D warehouse where we will go and look for some magnetic lighting. Pretty easy, pretty quick. Once again, the SketchUp 3D warehouse just makes the workflow a lot faster. As you can see, we are almost done there with just 12 minutes into the modeling, and there's pretty much not any other modeling software that can do this as well as SketchUp. And basically I imported the actual magnetic lights. Now what I went on to do is I just used a rectangular shape and input it inwards. That way we do take off the actual surface of the ceiling and it doesn't interfere with the lights. Then I go and download some recessed lighting once again. There's a group of 3. I just multiplied them all over the ceiling. I think there's like 4 groups of 3 that we need to do there. And then I try to find a pendant lighting which was as close to the reference image as possible, and I think it fit quite well even though it wasn't identical. Okay, so that was pretty much it, all the input that we needed in order to create the file in SketchUp. Next up, we are going to go to D5 render and we will apply the materials, the lighting, and do the final render there. And I will show you through everything how I do it and how we're able to create a realistic render towards the end. Okay, so first off, I just go ahead and try to fix the composition here. I go inside the camera in D5, I choose 2-point perspective, I make the aspect ratio to something which is vertical, and I just used the pixels or the resolution of 1080 by 1350, which is a 4:5 aspect ratio. Right after I fix that, I tone down the field of view at around 65 degrees, and I just switch the angle to something which is a lot more similar to our reference image. Right after that, I go to the materials. So I went on to find a herringbone flooring. I found something similar to the reference image. I put it in, and then I just go straight to the rotation and changing the size of it. Went to 135 to change the orientation and also made it a little bit bigger to fit the reference image once again. Then next up, I tried a few different woods for the actual island. However, this one I needed to make a lot smaller. This is the dark wall plate. It looked similar to the reference image as well, and then went on for a seamless marble that we applied on the countertop on both the cabinets and the island. Then I found a wood material for the table, which was right next to our island. That one fit very well. As you can see, D5 has a huge library of materials, and you very, very rarely need to get something external or imported. You pretty much have everything in there. And then I go to the kitchen cabinets. I change the color of them to something which is as close as possible to the reference image, and I tone down the roughness, that way they are a bit more reflective. Then I go find the mirror brass, which is basically the same material that we're looking for. This is basically what we were creating, the gaps that we created earlier. And I also found the brushed aluminum material. I applied it to the kitchen sink, and everything is slowly coming together. As you can see, we're applying all the materials one by one. We also found a white rough wall material, which gives the whole, I guess, room a bit more context and makes the materials a lot more realistic. Then I also changed the colors of the legs of the chairs. In this instance, they were almost had this brass look in the reference image. So once again, tried to match it, and I guess it as much as possible. Then I will move on to turn off the exposure. Turn it back on for just a second, because I actually was reminded that I also need to input the curtains. Went to the D5 library, imported the curtains, and then I was able to change the colors of the cloth right inside the model. Once again, super useful, super easy to use. And I basically just copied it on the other side as well. Tried some different angles, tried some different openings, but it worked just fine at the end because we matched it to the reference image as much as possible. Now I'm trying to place it correctly. I also had to hide somehow the place where the actual curtain is connected. I saw in the reference image that we had an opening there to the ceiling, and it wasn't like actually blocked off. However, it was a bit too late to go back to SketchUp, even though I could. I just wanted to keep the whole workflow in D5 now, and basically just imported a box or a cube in D5 and closed it off that way. And then I just took the same material that I used in the wall and applied it to that, I guess, curtain closure in that sense. Anyway, now I am moving on to change the fabric on the chairs. I'm trying to match something to the reference image once again. However, I'm just using the HSV function of changing the base color of the material. And you can see we matched that up pretty quickly. And then I turned the material template to cloth, which basically helps the material look a lot more like real life cloth. It has like lighting fall off and everything, which helps a lot. I also went on to try and import another fabric. So I used a brown cotton fabric, and it came out looking a bit better than what we had previously. Not a huge difference, but still worth a try. Then I moved on to a little bit of lighting, where I imported an HDRI. If you do not know what an HDRI is, it's basically an image taken in real life, which we can import in our render, and it will mimic real life lighting. So what I do here, I just tone down the skylight to 0.2, and the background is like 0.3, which is totally fine. And then I can rotate it to try and find a good lighting angle. And I turned off the auto exposure and just played around with the exposure manually and increased the exposure itself. As you can see, it was a bit too warm, so I had to make the white balance a lot cooler. However, I still like the way that the lighting was coming in, so I turned up the exposure while still not having to deal with that much warm of lighting. Then I went on to the rectangular lighting object. I imported it in, and I increased the size to be as much as the window opening itself. And as you can see, the lighting is closely coming to itself and just making the image a lot more depth and looking better. So then I went to import a carpet or a rug through the D5 asset library once again, which we could find almost anything and everything in there. So the combination of the 3D warehouse and the D5 asset library is just on a whole other level. While I am placing the lights here on the pendant lighting, you can see that I'm using the point lighting. I am making them a bit warmer. The intensity is a bit high as of now, however, I will just tweak that later on because I will lower the intensity, and as you can see, the auto exposure is just not working that great in this instance. So it still came out looking a bit too warm at the moment. However, I just went back to the HDRI and tried to tweak them once again to the way that it was previously. One thing that you do have to remember though is that anytime you make any changes to your scene, you have to hit that refresh button in that reload button, in fact, in your scene list in D5. So you can see now I'm using the strip lighting right at the countertop to try and mimic some LED strip lighting. I'm trying to make the temperature a lot warmer. As you can see, I'm playing with the attenuation radius as well and with the intensity, which I thought was a bit too high because it was just kind of burning the image in that way. So I tried to even play around with the barn door length, the angle, and all these different settings. It wasn't coming off the way that I wanted it yet. However, I was getting closer, just experimenting and just doing a lot of trial and error, because trust me, in most renders, you do not have like a set rule of, I guess, parameters that you can just follow in every single render. You can streamline your workflow a lot, but you still have to try and tweak things around for every single scene because it has different materials, it has different colors, and the lighting will come up differently, and there's just a lot of experimentation that has to be done, just like what you're seeing here on the scene. So next up, I go to the spotlights and I basically just apply all of them on the recessed lighting that we had here. Super low intensity, tweak the cone angle a bit just to make it a bit warmer so the shadows are a lot softer, and also just continue to play around with intensity because I didn't want the render to still look way too warm. I had the problem with HDRI and had to fix it with the effects tab. And then I went on to try some D5 curated effects in the preset library. Tried some of them, where I just went back to my own. I had to play around with the exposure and the white balance once again, but it was just coming off slowly to what we needed there. Okay, so next up, I'm gonna go back to the D5 render assets, and I'm going to try and find some accessories to fill up the scene to make it look a bit more lively. So I go and find a vase which is basically like a dried flower, and place it on the table there. I found some kitchen accessories, place it on the countertop of the island as well, and then I just continue to look at some other kitchen accessories in the actual asset library and place it on the countertop in the cabinets. Placed a saucepan in the oven as well, and yeah, now I'm just trying to tweak around the pendant lighting material as well, trying to make it a bit warmer, just so it looks like it's emitting some of the colors that we have inside with the point lighting, and as you can see, it looks much better that way. Cool, so now I'm going ahead and tweaking some of the materials once again for one final time. I'm tweaking the colors of it, also making sure that they have the right reflection by tweaking the roughness section as well. Next up, I'll do the same thing for the legs of the chairs. I am trying to tweak out some of the colors of it, and also I'm trying to tweak the color of the cloth material and the chairs, the fabric material. I'm trying to make it a bit brighter, which now has come closer to what we're aiming for. Also, the same thing for our table material here. I think it's too reflective because of the rectangular lighting that we have at the windows, so I had to tweak that out a bit, just that way it's not so shiny and so bright. Tweaked a little bit of the cabinet's color as well. This is basically just me giving the final touch, which is when I am close to actually pushing the render button and getting done with a project or a render in this case. So once that is done, I go to the render section in D5 and I basically just click render, and as soon as that is done, I'm going to go to the AI enhancer, which is a super useful tool. D5 has just put this in right now, which basically with just one click, I put the weight of AI to strong, and with just one single click, you can see the transformation that it did to render. Not that it looked bad in the raw form that it had, but it just put it to a whole nother level with just one click, and I totally love it. I thought this render came out great. Let me know what you guys thought. If you enjoyed this, please feel free to let me know. And if you want to see a full free D5 course on exteriors this time, click and watch the video right here.